In simple terms, it's when another entity apart from the club owns a future transfer value in that player. That's the simple 101, which is, what had happened in the past is that companies would have bought stakes in players' economic rights, their transfer rights, and provided that money to either a club or provided it to a player in return for some contractual promise that if they were transferred at a later time, then they would take a percentage of that future transfer. You're effectively speculating to accumulate at particular points. And obviously then younger talent is being identified as the basis for where a big transfer could therefore happen. And then that percentage obviously grows as a result. Now, what happened back in 2015 was that, and prior to that actually, with cases like Tevez and Mascherano in the Premier League and in the UK, was that third-party investment / third-party ownership was banned in the UK and a number of other European jurisdictions. That got extended worldwide by FIFA in 2015, so that no one apart from the player and or a former club by way of sell-on could own a future transfer value of that player. Whether that still happens in particular jurisdictions now would almost certainly be contrary to the FIFA regulations. But at a time now where lots of clubs are suffering significantly, I just wonder whether there may be a slight reevaluation of the prohibition, simply because fresh capital is pretty much needed and required in a number of in territories. And effectively, what are the biggest assets of a club? And a lot of the time, that is the players.
Do you think, going forward, do you think that this third-party ownership could be the thing, especially with the financial crunch, like you mentioned? Do you think that this can help, even not only maybe in other countries, somewhere down the league, in terms down the pyramid in the English football itself, maybe where they're having financial crunch? Do you think if you have third-party ownership, maybe that can kind of help it if people are not ready to reevaluate the full scheme of how to run the leagues?
It's difficult because FIFA's quite strong position is there are too many integrity issues to contend with, and that actually, when a lot of people said what we need to do is regulate the activity, FIFA's view was actually it should be banned completely because of these type of integrity issues. If it's whether a club owner owns an investment fund that owns stakes in players that might be playing against that club, are there particular incentives that make things more difficult? It may also be to do with whether actually anyone should be owning a player. It's not really that. I mean, it's a future contractual entitlement, but the emotive language that can sometimes be used, causes particular issues as well. So, ultimately, I think what FIFA and national associations wanted to avoid was this sort of speculative tool, which wasn't necessarily in the long-term interests of the players and or the leagues or the clubs sometimes, so that all of the money that was being invested into the clubs wasn't necessarily being reinvested, it was being removed from the football ecosystem. Now, query whether some clubs like FC Porto and others in smaller jurisdictions that don't have the same TV broadcasting monies and don't have the same commercial appeal, they were using third-party investments to their advantage, really, because otherwise they were getting investment from big companies who were willing to invest their capital in exchange for the upside. And that gave them, and those clubs in particular instances, significant competitive advantage, which they used to their advantage. Whether then those entities had disproportionate influence on when players could be sold or how they should be influenced in terms of new deals or selling at particular marks or otherwise, I agree with some of those concerns. So I can't see third-party investment coming back in too much of a shape or form anytime soon. But again, you never know.
Player-wise, it would have to be Steven Gerrard, just because, again, before he became a journalist, he was someone I just admired massively in terms of the absolute complete footballer. I think if you were trying to make a footballer in a factory, it would be Steven Gerrard, someone who, I think JB Carragher summed it up best once when he said, you know, Steven Gerrard's biggest strength is he doesn't have any weaknesses.
The stadium. I don't see really need to do that. Mainly such a big spending, but it's true that it would be a fantastic stadium. That's not bad, but you have to be careful, and mainly at this moment when we are going to face a very difficult time.